It's often the very end of the song, right? It's like that spot, because if the rest of the band's playing, like if you're holding chords and there's some noise, but the band is still playing around you, it's probably going to be fine. But at the end of the song, everybody's stopped, and you've got this big sustained chord that's meant to sound like music, not like noise. That's where it gets tricky.
This is the Self-Recording Band Podcast, the show where we help you make exciting records on your own, wherever you are, DIY style. Let's go. Hello and welcome to the Self-Recording Band Podcast. I am your host, Benedict Hein. If you are new to the show, welcome. So stoked to have you. If you're already a listener, welcome back. Always good to have you again. This show is available on YouTube and on all kinds of podcast apps. So if you're discovering this on Spotify or wherever, just know that you can also watch us do this. And if you're discovering this on YouTube, know that you can also listen in the car or while you're walking or doing the dishes, whatever. So both a podcast and YouTube. Today, I don't know, maybe it's worth checking out the YouTube because Malcolm might fall asleep during this episode. He's like a little tired today. I don't know. We'll see. As always, I'm not doing this by myself. I'm doing this with my friend and co-host, Malcolm Owen Flood. Hello, Malcolm. How are you?
I'm tired, like you mentioned. I'm really good. Listeners, a mutual friend of ours that Benny met when he was here for my wedding last year, my best pal, Liam, was visiting all summer, and him and his wife, also a dear friend of mine, Rebecca, they left this morning while we were doing our setup for this podcast. And so it was sad to see them go. And they live on the other side of Canada, which, if you're not familiar with how large Canada is like the entirety of the world. Yeah,
it feels like it when you fly over it, for sure. Yeah,
it is so far away. It's they'll be driving for over a week, I think. And so it was sad to see them go, but we had to stay up late and have maybe one more nightcap than we should have. So I'm not my usual self. I drank an entire pot of coffee while we were just setting up this podcast. That's insane.
So awesome. Oh, you're doing well, buddy. That's cool. So, I mean, even better that we have a very technical topic today where you really have to think about things, right? And I'm going to ask you a ton of questions.
So good.
Can't wait. So we're talking about noise reduction, noise removal, or how to avoid noise in your recordings in the first place. Because we haven't done a technical episode in a while, and I got the questions around this topic quite a bit the last couple of days and weeks. So we're going to talk about how to handle and reduce or remove noise in your recordings. And the thing is, usually everything we teach is about the music. So, the song, how we can serve the song, how we can make it connect and resonate with people. We try to avoid getting too technical usually, and we don't believe that gear or plugins are the solution to most of your audio problems. But sometimes we have to do purely technical work to remove what is distracting from the music so that we can go back to the song actually and focus on what really matters. And this is one of those things, like noise it comes in very many different forms, and it can be distracting. It can be, just a problem we need to solve and get rid of so that we can then be creative again and serve the song. And everybody has everybody has been in the situation where we have to deal with some kind of noise. And we're going to talk about that today and give you the how to avoid it, and if it happens and it is in your recording, then how to get rid of it or how to reduce it, and all the things you need to know about this. So
noise is one of those. Well, it's hilarious because noise is everywhere all the time, and we get used to it as human beings. We just drown it out, and especially consistent noises just stop bothering us. Like, I live by a highway, and I don't think about how the highway sounds ever, It's close, but I like it, and I hear it if I listen for it, but it's gone the rest of the time. If you were in your kitchen right now, your fridge is probably making noise. Your room just has a sound.
Yeah.
There's noise everywhere, and we get used to them. So until you stick a mic on something and you're trying to record it, you might not even notice it's there. And guitarists are the most guilty of this, I think, because most guitar chains have a pretty obnoxious hum.
Yeah.
And there's no silence, even when you're not playing. But until you try and record yourself, you don't think about that noise. And then you're like, dang it, there's this obnoxious hum. What do I do about that, right?
Yeah, totally. And so I'm kind of excited to talk about this, and also to help you just avoid it in the first place, because I get a lot of questions where people ask me, how do I get rid of this hum or hiss in my recording? And sometimes they ask me before they even record because they heard it, they did a sound check or whatever, they heard there was a noise. And then they immediately think about how to remove this later instead of trying to not even capture it or get rid of it at the source.
Right.
So this is step one here. But first of all, I want to know, Malcolm, since you work in the television, audio, TV, video kind of work in this like field, I'm assuming that noise removal or dealing with noise or keeping it out of recordings is a part of that job, I think, and not so much maybe hum and hiss and that kind of thing, but like background noise. And then, so I assume exactly you know a couple of things about that.
Yeah. For those not familiar, I do a lot of work in like documentary and reality television. So just like on location, recording people doing fun things, but with like no control over what those locations are going to be like, you know. So I've done shows where we're literally on the side of a mountain running heavy machinery. There's going to be some noise, right? It's really, really loud and problematic potentially. Actually, little plug and fun story for that's relevant to right now. I just filmed a video with my buddy Pioneer Pauly, who's like this really big YouTuber. He's got 788,000 subscribers.
Wow.
So he's like essentially his own little TV network, right? But we filmed a video where he's looking for gold and he's running this machine, running sand through this machine. And he's just got his cell phone as his like main talk to kind of vlog style camera. And he just talks into that, no mic, just into a cell phone. And I was like, are we going to be able to hear you? Like, is that even possible? He's right beside him, like loud machinery running. And to my surprise, yes, we could totally understand the words he's saying in the video. And I have this different relationship with noise where part of my brain is like, we have to deal with this and eliminate this. But then the other part is context. Does it actually matter? Mm-hmm. And I think that actually plays into the music world as well, where if we look back at some older Van Halen or something, there's probably some hiss if you go looking for it on tracks, but doesn't matter. Or is it in context? Is it a problem? So there's being too critical, and then there's being critical enough to get rid of something that's going to be a distraction. So keep that in mind throughout this episode.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, Benny, yes, we try and fix noise when we can. So that might be like walking into a room and being like, "Hey, do you mind if I unplug your fridge for the next 3 hours?" Well, I promise we'll remember to plug it back in when we leave. That's a really common thing. It could be closing the window on a car if we're doing a scene while we're driving, just so that it's consistent, like just the noise of the car. It's not the different noise coming from outside. We're trying to mitigate that as much as possible, but also being realistic and dealing with what we have to. And I think that honestly probably plays into the music world the exact same way.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally. And I love that you mentioned that it's not always a problem, because like if you listen to, like you said, old recordings that have been recorded to tape and through an analog console and all kinds of analog gear, all of those things have a noise floor and it adds up quickly, and it's actually a pretty loud hiss and like noise that you can hear on those recordings, and it doesn't really bother you. In fact, it can even be used as like, I'm not saying it's better with the noise, but sometimes it can even have a positive effect, or it can be used in a creative way. There are some recordings that I really enjoy of like very intimate acoustic guitar or piano recordings where there is an audible noise floor, and it kind of adds to the vibe in a way. And like it can even be, a creative tool. But like, so all that to say is like, it's not always a problem, but usually if you can avoid it, it's a good idea. You can always add it intentionally if you want, but like whenever possible, avoid it. And sometimes also people go the other direction and say like, it all sounded so good because things were noisy back then or whatever. That's also not true. Like they were trying to get the noise out of the recordings as much as they could, but it was just not possible. So it's not that it's there because it sounds better. It just is what it is, and maybe we got used to it. I don't know. But there's also no need to kind of, make up these romantic stories about it, because like it's just noise.
Noise being the secret to success. Yeah, exactly. That's not it.
Exactly. All right,
that's not it. And I think just one more thing for listeners to keep in mind while we're talking about these things is like the different types of noise. There's the noise you're trying to record. We'll call that signal. A term that will definitely come up is signal to noise ratio. And signal is what we're trying to record. Noise is everything else. But noise could be something that's like noticeably happening, like the fridge being on, like headphone bleed, like just your speakers being turned on by accident, where you can hear the click track into the mic you're trying to record with. That is noise, and obviously what we're going to be talking about eliminating. But then there's also natural noise. Maybe there's a better word for that, but like natural noise would be just like the sound of your room. Which every room has a sound. We call it room tone. It's just the environment. If you're recording outside, it's just the landscape kind of thing. Things maybe beyond your control. That's another type of noise. And then there's a third type of noise actually, and that is your chain, like your technical noise, and that is the hiss of your preamp if you turn it up too much. It is the noise floor of your microphone and your cables and all that, which is another thing that is probably the most avoidable, but also the worst of them all, because it does the least to it's like the least musical part of it is like just like an electronic hiss, So all of those could come up at any point, and all might be referred to as noise. Worth keeping in mind.
True, absolutely. Yeah, that's exactly what I meant when I said it comes in various like forms. Totally right. So let's dive into the how, like avoid and remove and reduce. So
yes,
avoid it at the source, first and foremost. Like capturing a noise-free signal is always better than removing it after the fact. So examples are guitar hum can often be avoided or at least reduced significantly at the source. Hiss, which is often a gain staging problem or a result of like using a dynamic mic with the wrong preamp or, that kind of thing. So we're going to talk about that real quick. And then noise from other electric devices, like you said, the fridge or a light or something in the room that causes that. So these are common examples of stuff that can be avoided if you just knew where the noise actually comes from.
Right.
So guitar hum, what can we do about this? Or what are the typical problems here?
Yeah. I mean, first thing you got to do is identify what's causing the hum. A really fun example that's very common is like single coil pickups. There's a reason humbuckers are called humbuckers. they buck hum. They get rid of it. But a single coil, they have hum. And I remember just like doing this, spending so much time doing this, but you can just spin around, get a chair that's on wheels, like, or on a swivel like I've got. And if you have your guitar plugged in and you let it hum and you just spin 180, you'll probably find a spot where the hum gets quieter. And you just record in that position. It's crazy. There's stories of people just being in the most awkward positions because it's the only way they could get their guitar to be quiet. Yeah. You're lying on the ground in the corner upside down. But if it works, it works. But that, again, kind of draws us back to the doesn't matter conversation at the same time. Yes, there's a hum. There will always be hiss and noise if you go looking for it, which is really important to remember. If you turn up your speakers listening for noise, you will find it 100% of the time. Yeah. It is that signal to noise ratio that you have to always be conscious of. Yes, you can hear hiss. Now have them play the guitar at the volume they're going to be playing. Can you hear it in contrast, in comparison to that signal that you're actually trying to record? Or is it really, really quiet? Keep that in mind every step of the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Common example is usually when you play distorted guitar and chords, like something like that, where it's just loud, you won't hear, like even if it's a really bad noise, you probably won't hear it. However, if there's, for example, like clean picking parts with space in between the notes and stuff, where or maybe you have a quiet delay or some details in between that you want to hear, then it could be a problem, because then in those spots the hum could get louder than, or like so loud that it's distracting from those detailed delays, or it could be audible in between the clean notes. So it completely depends on the context, what you're recording. But you're right, in many cases it's not even a problem. Okay, so one way to avoid it is find a good spot in the room, sure. The other way to avoid it is maybe you, like, I know, probably not ideal, but maybe if you have a couple of guitars and one is just not noisy because it has humbuckers, maybe it still sounds good enough and you can try that one. And I know I personally love a P90 pickup, for example, but those are like the noisiest of all. But maybe it's for this specific part you're trying to record, maybe you just need to switch to a different guitar. But usually there's ways to work around it. The other thing is try plugging in your entire chain. If you have like a pedal board and an amp and whatnot, try to plug that into the same power source versus trying like different circuits. So because that could create ground loops like that can cause hum. So if you try to have it all powered from one source. That's one thing I would always try. It typically gets worse if you use different sockets or especially different circuits where the power is coming from.
Yeah, you definitely want to try that. A big thing we're a proponent of on this podcast is recording a DI of your guitar every time. Why not? It's just the way to go. And most DIs, if you're using an external DI, and this is actually a big perk to the external DI versus the one built into your interface conversation, which comes up a lot. But most DIs, external DIs, have a ground loop button on them. And that can be the difference between a usable recording and not, is that one little button. Click that, does it get better? Does it get worse? And that can totally save the day. It can just eliminate that hum that's happened.
Yeah. Maybe one of your pedals on your pedal board has that too. Like just check if one of the things you're using has a ground lift or
and your amp might even have it too, actually.
Yeah. Totally. Then simple things like, it kind of is not a problem actually when you're playing then, but like still simple things like just touching your strings makes the hum go away sometimes, and if you don't touch it, there's a hum. So maybe just maybe you can do something physically to stop the hum from happening.
You can ground your own guitar by touching the metal.
And then finally, your guitar or your cables or both could have grounding issues or like shield issues. Like there could be an issue with the guitar where it's just something's not, or with the cable, there's better shielded cables and not so good cables. So it could be that switching to a better cable or getting your guitar serviced is what you need to do, because there could be an actual technical problem. Like I've had some guitars where no matter what you've done, they were just way too noisy. And so, this is definitely something that you need to be aware of too, that this can become a problem over time even. Like things can get bad at some point. Like I'm not technical enough when it comes to guitars to really be able to, like simple things I can fix, but maybe it's time to just take it to the shop and make sure it's actually, you get rid of whatever ground problem you have.
Yeah, I've gone through great pains in that department. If you're watching YouTube, you can see my guitar here.
Yeah.
But if you're just listening, I'm holding a guitar and I'm pointing at the back panel where the pots are for my guitar and the pickup switch. Those cavities and even the cavities under my pickups are all plated with metal. They have. I can't even remember how they did it. I haven't even looked at it, but they essentially are shielding these cavities to try and reduce the noise floor, because this is a particularly noisy Les Paul, really hot pickups. And I've just tried to reduce that as much as possible. I actually don't have a clue if it made a single difference, but I tried.
This is funny as well. Yeah, but whatever you got to do. So it could be a problem, like a problem with the guitar or the cable or both. But there's plenty of things already that you can try and do before you just accept it and then try to remove it afterwards. And what matters most with all these things is, again, listen to what it sounds like with whatever you're recording. Like when you're playing, do you hear it? And pay attention to like quieter parts where there's gaps between, where there's like, the gaps are not even the problem. You could cut it out there or use a gate or whatever. But the problem is when the chord rings out and then or the note rings out, and while it rings out, the noise comes up and becomes audible. That's what you want to check, because you might think it's okay when you're playing, you can't hear it. But what if then the part is over and you want to have the guitar like ring out or fade out slowly, and then the noise creeps up and you don't want that. And I have this a lot when people send me stuff to mix and I send them the mix back. And then a lot of the times people are like, can we get rid of the noise in the fade out at the end or when this part ends, And I'm like, yeah, kinda, but the problem is that it becomes louder than your actual guitar signal, and that's kind of the problem. And there's still ways to deal with that, but sometimes people just miss that, because while everything's loud, nobody notices, and then there's this one part where the note rings out and then you hear the noise. So pay attention to that, and it's all about the context.
Yeah, it's often the very end of the song, right? It's like that spot, because if the rest of the band's playing, like if you're holding chords and there's some noise, but the band is still playing around you, it's probably going to be fine. But at the end of the song, everybody's stopped, and you've got this big sustained chord that's meant to sound like music, not like noise. That's where it gets tricky. Yeah,
exactly. Okay, the other stuff is pretty obvious with like other electric devices. Just try everything in the room and see if it makes a difference. Like turn off lights, unplug things. maybe you're lucky, maybe you're successful. With lights, it can be often the case, actually, and other devices too, fridges and stuff like that. Just try.
Yeah, this reminds me of building the room I'm in right now, the little studio suite I built. We put dimmers in here, like dimmable light switches, which
Smart
are
idea.
the devil, it turns out. They are awful for audio. I honestly can't even figure out, like, it's beyond my understanding of
why that is.
electronics and physics of why it's so bad, but having dimmers in your room essentially causes noise in your guitars. And I live on a farm, and if I plug in a guitar right now, I will hear a periodic click, and it is the electric fence on the opposite side of the property.
Yeah.
It's so frustrating, but electric fence is also terrible for guitar recording. So if I want to record guitars, I have to go track down the electric fence that is plugged in somewhere on this acreage and unplug it for my guitar recording session. It's so weird.
That's funny.
It's so frustrating, but it's the way it is. And Silverside Farm, which comes up all the time on this podcast, he's also on a farm, and it's a beautiful studio. Everything's wired, purpose-built for a recording studio. It still has the electric fence issue.
Really?
We got to unplug those fences when we're recording guitars.
Wow. That's awesome. Yep. I mean,
you'll run into this. But yeah, so dimmable switches, turn them off. That's the solution. I just removed them from the studio. That's how I did that.
Yeah.
But yes.
Totally. Yeah. Okay, another thing here is hiss that you can avoid at the source. Hiss is like more of a broadband thing, like, you know what hiss is. And hiss is often a result of, it's often a gain staging problem where every piece of gear in your chain has a noise floor. Everything has some hiss, like every microphone has a hiss that it produces, every preamp, everything in your chain. And some, like, depending on where you amplify the signal and in which order and things, you can influence the overall signal to noise ratio. And you know that what you do there has an impact on like how much hiss you're actually recording. And so what I'm saying is, for example, a cheap built-in mic preamp on a entry-level interface. If you turn that up more than halfway or maybe 3/4 of the way or so, at some point they become pretty noisy. Like you introducing the noise that is just part of that circuit. And so maybe your microphone is not the problem. Maybe something you plug into this thing is not the problem. But if the source is really quiet and you amplify it at this preamp stage with this cheap preamp and you go too far, you have a lot of hiss in your recording. Versus if you send a stronger signal of a good microphone or a good preamp in front of it or some other device into the cheap thing and you don't turn it up as much, you get a quieter signal, right? Because like it totally depends where and how you amplify the signal. So a common example, let's say you plug in an SM7 or some sort of dynamic mic into a Scarlett or some sort of entry-level interface. If there is nothing in between and you just crank the preamp on the interface because that mic is really quiet, you get a lot of noise because the SM7 is quite noisy and the preamp of the interface as well. If you now put something like an inline preamp, something like a Fathead, a Cloud Lifter, something you can put in between the mic and the preamp, if you put that in there, you get an extra 20 dBs, 15 dBs of clean gain before you hit the interface, so you don't have to crank the interface as much, results in a sound, in a recording with less hiss, with lower noise floor. So it's just a gain staging thing. Or maybe you have a certain pedal or effect or preamp into another thing, and all of those have different noise floors at different volumes. It's worth experimenting which one to turn up and which one to turn down until you find the ideal signal to noise ratio, because you can have the exact same result in terms of level with completely different noise floors depending on where you turn up the gain. This is just proper gain staging, and sometimes you have to experiment a little bit because the output of one might be noisy but the input of the next one not, and vice versa. And so it makes a difference to amplify it here versus here, and things like that.
I think for our community the most common issue will probably be using the wrong mic for the wrong job kind of thing. Like a SM57, standard mic you find everywhere. I love that on acoustic guitars. Doesn't sound good. It just sounds right.
Yeah.
It's like the part I need in a dense rock mix is just that like attack and mid range. That's all I really need to capture in like a lot of productions. I don't need it to sound like this big full thing. And it sounds just like that. It's perfect, but it's quiet. That's the mic we stick on a snare drum, which is very loud. But when you stick it on like a finger-picked acoustic guitar, it's quite quiet, and you're going to run into hiss in that scenario. So that's where, something like pulling out a FET head is kind of the lifesaver for me to still be able to use that mic for that job.
Yeah, absolutely. That's very, very true. The quieter the source is, the more sensitive the mic should be with a lower noise floor. And if you still want to use a dynamic mic, then this external and extra preamp thing like a FET head can really, be the thing you need to get rid of the noise. And sometimes, like we said, sometimes maybe you don't even have to fight it and just embrace it or just accept it, and it's not even a problem. So it's up to you to decide. But
Totally. Yeah. I feel like we should, it doesn't matter, but cloud lifter. I'd get a cloud lifter. I had a FET head and it died for no reason. So
same for me. I had 2 FET heads actually, and both died. So
they're really cool. I like the design layout. It's so small and awesome, but the cloud lifter seems to be a more reliable piece of gear.
Yeah, I think so. We are still to have Roger Cloud on this podcast actually, from Cloud Microphones. So I met him at NAMM and he promised to come, so we'll see.
I swear I didn't know that when I gave that endorsement, guys. He just makes good things.
But he's a very knowledgeable. I talked to him for 5 minutes at NAMM and he explained mic impedance and the difference it makes in terms of sound and stuff. He explained that to me within, 1.5 minutes or so, in a way I could absolutely understand. And I was just like, can you say that exact thing on our podcast, please? Because I could never explain it that well to our audience.
Awesome. So that'd be perfect, because that is a total mystery to me. Why does this button change so much?
Yeah. Yep. So that's what we're gonna do. Anyway, so Cloud Lifter. One thing I can recommend is I have a very cheap one actually from Clark Technique. The company that I think belongs to Behringer or something. But they make a very cheap FET head kind of clone that works very well without a problem. Sounds really good. Then I've used another one from SE Electronics, also good. And maybe we just didn't have luck with our FET heads, but I can recommend the Clark one for sure because it's cheap and has been working forever now without a problem. And the Cloud Lifters, every one of those that I've ever used, also flawless. So
yeah, they're great.
Cool, awesome. Now, next thing here is, I think we need to tell people, we already said there's different kinds of noises, but I think what's important when it comes to noise removal is that there's broadband noise, where it's basically, it includes all the frequencies from the lowest frequencies to the highest frequencies, or at least a broad range of frequencies, versus specific frequencies, where a hum, like ground hum or something, can be a very specific frequency, or it can be, 50 hertz or 60 hertz hum, depending on where you are on this planet. It can be a single frequency, which might be easier to isolate and remove, versus a broadband noise that's across the entire thing. Or it can be a super high frequency hiss, where you might even be able to filter it out, versus one that's like pink noise across the entire spectrum. So that's important to know, and we'll get to why later when you see how you remove it actually. And then also know that it's so important to try and get rid of the source, because removing it is always a little bit of a compromise. It's not possible to do that without doing any damage to the audio. You can cut it out.
Removing it later, you mean? If you get it at the source, there's probably that's a benefit. There's probably no bad cost to that. But there could be. But usually that's just like a no-brainer. That's the way to go. But if you're doing it in the post process, it's already recorded and we got to get this hiss out of this guitar, there's definitely a cost to that.
Yeah, exactly. And now people might think, okay, why don't I just use a gate? I mean, after all, it's called noise gate. I can just gate out the noise. The thing is, it's not just present when there is no audio, not just in the gaps. It's also there when there is actual audio. And as we said, it might not be a problem, but maybe it is a problem, or maybe there are certain parts where it's a problem. And then the gate doesn't help you, because the moment that your actual signal you want to have gets lower or just low enough in comparison to the noise, you can't gate it anymore. You will either have to gate the entire thing, or it's just a gate can just get rid of anything that's below a certain threshold. But if your actual signal is also below the threshold, then you can't gate it. And if and if you want to hear something and you hear the noise at the same time, gating is just not an option. I hope this makes sense, because a lot of guitarists I know, they have noise gates pedals, or there are noise gates built into amps even. And that's all fine so that that it's not noisy as hell on stage when you're not playing. But while you're playing and you're playing that clean part, whatever, where the notes ring out, you'll still have the noise. So the gate is not a solution.
Is like a common gripe for me with like modern guitar plugins, amp sims.
Yeah.
It's so amazing how good they've gotten. But they all have noise gates turned on by default.
Yep.
And then I get to the end of the song, typically again, where there's like a held out chord and the fade out just cuts, because the noise gate kicks in as the signal gets quieter as they're holding that chord. And it's like, like, no. So I have to go automate that out or.
Or you have to turn it off and then you realize how noisy it actually is the whole time or whatever. Like, yeah.
You might, that's actually a great point. If you're recording with a guitar amp sim as your amp, it's probably got a plug-in or a gate turned on by default, and you might not even realize that you've got a hiss that could have been removed, easily. Maybe you forgot to turn your dimmer light off.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, so that's important to understand about noise. Now, the ways to reduce or remove it if you have to. The bad news in the beginning here is, at least in my opinion, and maybe you have a different experience there, Malcolm, but I think this is one of those areas, unfortunately, where stock plugins won't get you very far here, because beyond gates, there is not much, at least in audio DAWs, there's not much built into them that help you with noise removal. It's interesting to me that like video software has it built into it to a degree. I don't know if it would work for music or if it's just specifically for dialogue, but it seems that like DAWs for music don't really give you any tools as far as like stock plugins or options there.
Yeah. We won't go too deep into this because it's not that relevant, but the video world's gotten really fascinating lately with AI, because AI is able to understand what a word is and what isn't. So it's essentially just be like, well, this is part of the language I know, this isn't, I'll remove that. And it works incredibly well. So dialogue cleanup is getting really good. But I don't think there's anything that can do that with a guitar or a drum. I don't think it's there yet. And it would probably be much more complicated to make it do that because of how different guitars and instruments can sound from recording to recording. But yeah, it is very commonplace to do noise removal in the video world, but in the music world, like Benny just said, it's not at all. And the chances are that you don't own any tool that can do noise removal other than a noise gate. So the one most people would have heard of for audio repair, noise removal would be Isotope Ozone, that's not true. Isotope RX.
Yeah.
That is, if you've looked into this, you've probably come across Isotope, because they're like the big pioneers of doing this and very popular. But it's software that lets you specifically try and repair or go after nitty-gritty details in really detailed ways, which can be really cool. It's also extremely frustrating.
yeah, totally. It's kind of crazy what you can do with the current versions of the software and similar things. So it's gotten really, really good, and you can really do amazing things. You can remove individual clicks and pops and noises and even like entire parts if you want to from a finished master. So it's really good. But also the full suite of like RX, for example, is not really cheap. So it's like an advanced tool for audio professionals. What's important to understand before we get deeper into this is that whatever you're using, it's smart to leave, like many people do a cleanup, like a manual cleanup before they go into more detail. They try to get rid of the noise manually in between, when there's in the gaps and stuff. And this is all like of course you want to do that, and it makes sense. But it's actually smart.
You mean like by manually? You mean like cutting out audio clips, right?
Yeah, exactly. Get like strip silence or getting rid of like the noisy parts in between. I'm just saying that before you do that and commit that, it's smart to keep a second or two or whatever of the actual noise, if possible, like isolated, because all the other things that we're going to be using, plugins or spectral editors like RX and stuff, they either work the way that like we teach them what the noise is, and then they remove it out of whatever the signal is. So you can we'll get to that, but like it's good to have the noise isolated somewhere so that you can tell the tool what to actually remove, or so you can learn what it is and look at it in the spectral editor and then find it more easily later when you get rid of it manually. So I think it's smart to not clean it up entirely, because it's way harder to get rid of it if you don't have it isolated somewhere.
Yeah, that is literally the whole reason of that whole room tone thing you've probably heard of about in television, where they just hold for recording room tone, and we're just recording the silence of the room essentially, but there is noise, and that is the noise we want to remove from the dialogue we just recorded.
Yep.
So these softwares will use that as a profile. They can analyze that and be like, okay, everything I'm hearing right now, we're going to remove it from over here. Exactly. And that results in hopefully a really transparent and natural sounding noise removal.
Yeah.
It doesn't always, though.
Yeah. I've actually at NAMM, I've heard an interesting talk of a mastering engineer. I forgot the name now, sorry, but like, it was a very interesting panel, like talk, and the mastering engineer was there, and he was answering like common questions from mix engineers, and he said that sometimes mix engineers ask him if he could like remove noise from the mix, like they got it down to a certain degree, but maybe they don't have the advanced tools that he has, or like can't get it in a clean way or whatever. He said, if you want me to do this, please leave a second or two of a gap before the song starts, so I can actually hear that noise and analyze it, so that I can then remove it from your mix. So if you want me to do noise removal, please leave it somewhere in. It was actually something he said there, and it's the same thing with the recording. So
you need that little sample of noise to be able to analyze for sure.
Yeah. So what you mentioned, Malcolm, the iZotope RX comes in two ways. Like there's the RX plugins, like the denoise, dehum, declick, whatever, all kinds of noise removal plugins that you can put on the track, and then you can either like render it into the track or like use it in real time. They are tools for specific jobs. And then there's the full RX software, where it's a spectral editor more than anything, where you look at this fancy looking orange, red, yellow graph thing.
What is that called again?
Spectral editor.
A spectro, but the type of view is spectrogram. Sorry, listeners.
Yeah, probably.
Audio. Because like certain DAWs can just display waveforms in this as well, I think, right? I think it is a spectrogram.
Spectrogram, yeah, I just looked it up. Yep.
So a spectrogram is really fascinating. It allows you to see time like a normal waveform does. You can see the space of the transients and the decay of the signal, which is amplitude. So a normal waveform gives you, time and amplitude. But this gives you frequency as well. So essentially it's colored by intensity, and lower frequencies are lower on the image and higher frequencies are higher on the frequency. So if there's a bunch of like color at the bottom, you know that you've got bass frequencies engaged and recorded, and vice versa. So if you see like an intermittent high frequency coming in and out, you've got something ticking. It could be the clock. It's pretty fascinating, honestly. It's a really clever way to see audio.
Yeah, and what's really cool about this is in RX or any spectral editor, there's one that's amazing that's built into WaveLab by Steinberg, for example. Then there's Spectral Layers by Steinberg that comes with Cubase in the limited version, and then there's the full version you can buy. And then there's more probably, but all these spectral editors, what they do is you can edit this spectrogram, meaning you see like the ticking click that you just mentioned, or the bass frequency, or the hum, or whatever. And you can just you can draw a circle around it with your mouse, and then just erase it while keeping everything else intact. And it's if you're detailed and you take your time and do it properly, it's fascinating how well that actually works. Like it's really crazy. I've removed a snare drum hit from a song while a guitar was playing, and there was no hole in that guitar. Right, the snare drum was just gone. So it's really crazy.
It's fascinating.
Yeah. Totally. And but again, if you have that sample of noise that you want to get rid of, let's say it's a guitar recording and you have that hum, if you have that isolated sample, you can look at it in the spectrogram. You can learn what this actually looks like, where it is, which frequency and all that. And then it's way easier for you to identify that when the guitar is playing and get rid of just that without causing damage to the guitar. Or there's always some compromise, but at least do it in the most clean way. But it's a thing you need to invest in if you want that. It's a kind of fancy audio repair tool, and not everybody needs that, but it is, I think, the best way to deal with this. Everything else is like a little bit of a compromise. I think spectral editors, and especially RX or WaveLab, or these like, well-known tools, I think it doesn't get much better than that at the moment.
Yeah, totally. I feel like if you are just a musician recording your own music, you probably won't need this. But if you are doing this professionally for other people, it's just a matter of time until you need it, because you'll have to remove a click track bleed from something. It's like 100%.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just that. Yeah, or like the hum or something like that. It will come up. Yeah. the RX plugins, they are, I think, there's like some cheap entry level sort of bundle or whatever, and there's a subscription too with iZotope, but you can get those a lot cheaper, these individual tools and plugins, and they can do a great job sometimes too. So there is like a dehum or denoise plugin where, again, it learns, like you can click a learn button, I think, and you can show it like the sample of noise, and then it creates a curve and identifies like which frequencies and whatnot, and then you can apply that to the actual signal, and it works relatively well. I mean, I use it mainly to reduce it, not really to remove it. Remove it entirely is it's almost never really possible, but you can remove it significantly. So it doesn't work for a click sound or like removing a snare drum, like I said, but it works for hiss and hum to a degree, and it's a kind of intelligent tool that helps you do it, and it's very, very quick. But again, you need this kind of sample for it to do a good job.
One more type of noise, actually, I don't think we've mentioned yet, is room decay, like echo.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like if you're in a really live room and you need it to not sound echoey and reverberant, there's also tools that will do this that can also kind of suck that out of it and make it a drier sounding recording. Works far better on voice than it does on music, though, I'll be honest. If that's your problem, record it in a different room, I would say. Or treat it.
Yeah,
you know?
I agree. I agree.
We've got whole episodes on that, on how to make dead sounding rooms.
Totally, I agree. Yeah, there's many like D-Room or D-Verb or whatever plugins that you can use. Even a simple transient designer can sometimes work by just reducing the sustain a little bit. But like the one that I have the most success with lately is called Clarity VX by Waves. It's really, really good. And there's two different versions, I think. There's one that's a noise removal thing and one that's a room sound removal. And both are pretty clever. I think that it uses some kind of neural network, AI, whatever, processing under the hood. I don't know what exactly is going on. I just know that it works really well. And I've used that, for example, on the last episode with Addy that we had. Addy was relatively far away from his mic, and there was a lot of room sound, and the two of us sounded much drier, and I just used Clarity VX, and all of a sudden Addy sounded like he's very close to the mic, and we couldn't hear any room noise anymore. So with vocals or voice, absolutely cool.
Yeah. For the spoken word, it's gotten insanely good, which is awesome, and it's quite affordable too, compared to like again the iZotope RX bundle. You're going to spend like $1,000 if you get the big thing, the whole package. But I think I got this Waves Clarity D-Reverb for like $29 or something. Pretty good.
Yeah, I'm just looking up. It's on sale right now, actually. I don't know when this podcast airs if it's still the case, but it's like $39 now instead of $199.
And like, if you have a need for it, like, you know, I do YouTube videos, I need that plugin in case I'm not recording in this room and need to dry it up. It's essential. Yeah, and it's always on sale at some point. Like nobody with half a brain like buys a Waves plugin at full price. Like, so true. Yeah. If you're new to this world, don't buy Waves plugins at full price. No, don't do it. Don't do it. They're always on sale. And they will never sponsor this show. No, exactly. Yep. All right. So the other thing is you can do. Sometimes it's surprisingly simple. Sometimes that's why I said that there's different types of noise in broadband and not broadband and stuff. So sometimes maybe it's really just a high frequency hiss, or only the high frequencies are audible, and maybe the actual signal doesn't really need those high frequencies anyways. And so maybe the only thing you need to do to reduce it enough is to use a high cut at everything above 10K or something, and that can do it, right? So sometimes a gentle roll off or a low pass, high pass, something like that can get rid of the problem you're having, and that's it. Or a narrow EQ cut if it's a certain frequency, a certain hum, you know, just notching that out might be the thing that does the trick. Yeah, EQ is my most common way of dealing with plosives. Like, so, because plosive, anybody not familiar, there you go. Benny will probably clean that out in the edit, actually. But there's, actually, I don't know if you run into this, Benny, but I was going to add this to our list of things that I encounter a lot with DIY recordings is plosive problems, and they're using pop filters. They're just not using them correctly. It's fascinating. But there's a plug for my YouTube channel. Go look up my pop filter video, and you'll see how much of a difference placing your pop filter can make. As I just give you another pop into my microphone here. Yeah, totally. Go to Malcolm's channel. It's just Malcolm Owen Flood, right, on YouTube. Yep, just my name. Awesome. Yeah, do that. But yeah, so essentially, people position it wrong, and we end up with more plosives than we should, more plosive noise than we should in their vocal recording. And a simple low cut can often solve that problem for me.
Yeah, 100%. Most of the time does, actually. I do the same thing. Yeah. And then finally, one thing I absolutely want to mention here. If you're having hiss issues or any kind of noise issues that you don't remember you had when you just recorded the raw signal or whatever, if it seems like it's creeping up while you're mixing, have you double-checked the analog and like noise buttons and knobs on your plugins? I've run into this a couple of times, honestly. I was like opening up, and sometimes these things don't recall correctly, at least in Cubase and with some of the Waves plugins. So I remember opening up sessions and being like, what the hell? Like it's, just everything's like, it's this massive hiss that's coming at me and I don't know where it comes from. Turns out that for whatever reason, the noise switch on, I think it was Plugin Alliance consoles that had the noise switch cranked all of a sudden. Yeah. And then there's the noise dial. And then there's the noise or analog buttons on the Waves plugins.
And
that
Slate
was just
as
on.
Well, I think, right?
Sorry?
I think Slate has it as well.
Could very well be. Yeah, there's a lot of them out there. And all it ever does, and it's especially tricky when it says analog, because if it says noise, most people know what it is and you turn it off if you don't want it. I think it's not a good way, like not a good thing to call it analog, because people assume it's making things better. But in the case of Waves, if you're using the classic Waves plugins like the CLA 76 or something like that, all it does is it adds hum and hiss, and that's it. There's no extra saturation. There's no benefit to it. There's nothing cool about it in terms of like sonics. It's just the noise. But people think they have to turn it on because then it sounds like analog. That's what it suggests if you read it, but it's really just noise. So just go through your plugins, make sure you turn all those switches off, because unless you want the noise, there's no benefit to having that on. And it can really add up really quickly. So
quickly. I can't think of a one time I wanted to turn those on. So I hate that they exist, honestly, but it's a reality.
And they're on by default, I think.
Yeah, I know. It's so crazy. Like I don't understand why. I wish if they wanted to have the word analog in the plugin, I get it, but I wish that button literally did nothing. It was just a button you could click. That'd be totally great. And like this comes up every mix for me, honestly. Every single mix I do, right before I send it, I think about noise, and I realize that by limiting and mastering it, it's brought up noise. Then that is all artificially caused by plugins. Even plugins that don't have these analog buttons sometimes have noise. Like I can never remember the name of this plugin, but you'll know. I always call it the Townhouse plugin.
Townhouse compressor. Yeah.
It is Townhouse. I got it right for once. Yeah. That compressor has noise. It sounds amazing and it's worth it, but it has noise. So I have to keep that in mind. And a lot. You can? There's a button for that?
Yes. There's a dial. Where? There's like most of the Plugin Alliance plugins have this, what do you call it? They have a term for this. It's on all those plugins. You can turn it off for sure.
What? Oh my God.
Yep.
So that'll be easier.
The consoles have that as well.
Save that as my preset. But yeah.
Anyway, but yeah.
Essentially, some plugins have noise. I'm looking at it right now. Where is this noise?
I'm going to pull it up as well. I got to show you. To go here. So, you see VGain at the top?
Yes.
That's it.
That's it.
By default, it's like halfway or something. If you just turn that down to all the way to the left, it's gone.
Oh, gosh. Okay,
VGain is what they call noise. It's just noise. They call it VGain in Plugin Alliance land. It's the same with the consoles. And sometimes that thing doesn't recall correctly, so I turn it off, especially when I have the console across all my channels, and I turn it off. You can link it so that you turn one down and it turns it all down, but it didn't recall correctly in some instances, and so I open up the session for a recall, and all the VGains were cranked, and so this can happen.
See, we're all learning something here. This is great.
Yeah.
This is why we do this. But what I have to do often is I have my like stem groups where, all the drums go, all the guitars go to their own tracks and stuff like that. And when there's not something playing, I automate them down to nothing, or I automate a mute on. So those tracks are turning on and off to completely eliminate their noise floor, because all of their individual noise floors can add up to something audible. And my drum bus is always noisy because I have like devil lock crushing stuff, and it's noisy. So I have to, if the drums aren't playing, I'm totally muting them out. Otherwise they're going to be there. So we're getting into kind of advanced mixing stuff, but it's just this reality that we have to think about noise kind of the whole way through.
Absolutely. And again, the gain staging thing, it might be, how much level you send from one plugin to the next and where you turn up things, turn down things makes a difference. So maybe you're coming out very hot from one plugin, or like maybe you turned it down a lot on one plugin and you have to compensate for that on the next one. But the one you use to compensate is the noisy one, then you get more noise versus doing it the other way around. So that's always a thing to keep in mind.
Noise also might be not an issue at one point and become an issue later. The common issue of that is just light headphone bleed on a vocal track in between words. Might not be audible until the final stage of mastering, and then it comes up loud enough to finally be heard.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think we covered it. I think that's it, really.
Yeah, I think so too.
I would repeat what you said before, Malcolm, that for most people who just make music for themselves and you're not a professional engineer, I don't think you have to invest in like the crazy, the big Isotope RX suite, although it is very powerful. I think the most important thing is to avoid it altogether at the source, then to learn when it is actually a problem versus when you just have to live with it or even embrace it. And then the other thing, and then what you can do is like get some of those, or one of those simple noise removal tools, like the smaller like Isotope plugins, or some of the Wave stuff. And I think that's really, if you do it properly and you learn about like all the things that we said, like gain staging, getting it right at the source, I think that's all you really need for music. And if you run into the problem with like headphone bleed or click or whatever, lesson learned, do it better next time, right? It's like that's I think it's better than spending $1,000 to solve that.
I totally agree. And honestly, trying to clean out a whole track of a click track is just like, it's nauseating. It's a lot of work. It doesn't do it for you.
It is. Oh, and by the way, there are people like that has been a theme during the last couple of episodes, but like there are people who do this for money and it's not that expensive. You would be surprised. Like if you really need a noise removal job done and you don't have the tools, maybe before you spend days of trying to figure it out, or you have to buy like an expensive plugin thing, maybe it's just way cheaper and easier and quicker to just hire someone. I bet you can find an editor somewhere who will do it quickly and you for not much money, and then you have it back and
better than you as well, because there is kind of skill to it. Yeah. Good point.
All right, cool. That's it. Now,
awesome.
If you want to know, because I know that with these episodes, the question that always comes up, same as with the editing episodes, is always like, how do I know when it's too much? And, and how do I don't know if my recordings are too noisy or if that's a problem or whatever. If you want to be totally sure and you want to get feedback on that, and you want somebody who can tell you, hey, watch out here, I hear this noise, this could become a problem later, this kind of thing, or I can help you remove this is actually simple with the tools you have, whatever it is, if you want to have that second like opinion and just be sure that it doesn't become a problem at the end in your mix, then just apply for our coaching program, because that's exactly what we do here. Like if you do that, if you join our coaching program, the Self-Recording Syndicate, I'm going to be your remote recording buddy. And if you have questions like that, or you want to be sure that your recordings are clean and usable, and that it's all mix ready and basically everything's done right, start to finish, that's exactly what I'm here for. So you can upload your stuff as often as you want. You get feedback every single day. You get playbooks and instructions and like how to actually do these things and how to avoid them, how to avoid problems. And you have an amazing community of other people as well. Like it's the full thing. It's not an online course. It's a collaboration. It's personal feedback and guidance. So if that sounds interesting to you, you can go to theselfrecordingband.com. It's all on the website. You can just scroll down, see what's included, what's not included, how it all works, and then you can hit the Apply Now button. And then we jump on a free call. If your application is accepted, we jump on a free call, talk about exactly where you are, where you want to go, what you need in order to get there, and whether or not the program is a great fit. And best case scenario, we end up working together. Worst case scenario, you get an hour of free coaching. So go to theselfrecordingband.com.
Awesome.
Great. Perfect. See you next week then.
Adios.
Adios. Bye.